See you. Hi, now today I'm going to show you what the common outfit of a woodland Native American would have looked like in the mid-1700s. Now, the woodland region is a region that stretched from up in Canada down to the Carolinas, and it was home to many Native American tribes such as the Iroquois Confederacy, the Lenni Lenape, or other tribes. Now, one thing about this region is it was one of the first places that Europeans made contact with Native Americans in North America. And this was, at this time in the 1700s, they had made solid contact, and you can start to see very obviously how European way of life and European goods had certainly infiltrated its way into the Native American communities and into the natives' way of life, and obviously into their dress. So one thing that you see with Native Americans, and this stayed pretty common throughout, even into the late 1800s, and this was the Moccasins Footwear. Moccasins were worn all the way through Native American. It wasn't something that really got taken over by white man's goods until very late on. So in the 1700s, most Native Americans, if not all Native Americans, were definitely still wearing moccasins. And the moccasins that is common to the woodland region was very unique because it was made in such a way that the stitching was always down the center. It was called seam moccasin. Now this would become copied by Europeans eventually, by the long hunters and things. They would start to make moccasins as their footwear wore out, and they would make the copy it off of the way the woodland Native Americans did. So like I said, their moccasins were unique in the fact that it was stitched center seam, and this was done by pretty much all woodland Native Americans of the region. Now, the next thing that the woodland Native Americans wore was they would wear, they didn't wear pants. They wore breechcloth, which is basically a cloth that wraps around a belt and goes through your crotch. It's the breechcloth. Now, prior to European contact, these would obviously be leather or deerskin, but after European contact, one of the very first things you see being replaced and traded to the natives is cloth, particularly red cloth, and this was done, and this was one of the first things replaced, probably because it was just a more comfortable thing to have wrapped around your crotch. So you see red cloth being very common to be worn. Another thing that happened was they would wear leggings to protect their legs, because as I said, they didn't wear pants. So if they were going off on a trek, if they were going off onto a war party or a hunt, they would be running through the brush, running through the woods, and they would want some sort of protection around their legs that wasn't offered by the cloth, and this would be where leggings would be worn. Traditionally, this would be leather, as you see as I'm wearing today, and this would eventually be replaced by trade cloth, but leather was traditional, leather was original, and it was still worn in the 1700s. Many natives were still rocking the leather leggings. Now, another thing that you see is leg ties were worn. Now, there were two real common types of leg ties being worn. There were wampum leg ties, which I'll get into later, which was beaded shells, and then there was woven leg ties. Now, prior to European contact, these woven leg ties would be woven with something natural, some natural fiber like jute. But after European contact, you would see you'd see cloth and other things traded to the Native Americans, and they would start using not natural fibers to weave their leg ties, but they were still weaving leg ties and making leg ties to be worn. Now this would be worn for speculated many reasons why they wore these leg ties. One speculation is it just kept the leggings tighter fit to their skin. One, maybe it would protect from bugs crawling up any higher up their legs. It could be many things. Now working your way up, I want to mention that it was very common for woodland Native Americans not to wear shirts at all. They traditionally had no real shirts, especially in summertime. I know you always picture Native Americans riding through the plains on horseback wearing those buckskin, big decorative shirts, but that wasn't common up in the woodland regions of America. They would often and sometimes go with no shirts, and often go with even no leggings if they weren't on a hunt or a raiding party or something. They would just go almost naked. So Native Americans were very common for running around with very little clothing on. So, but after European contact, this started to change. Now, in the wintertime, they obviously had to wear something, and it was more common for them just to wrap up in hides and wear, like, hide cloaks, just like you saw me doing in the beginning of the video. I walked in wearing a bear hide. That was the common practice, just to wrap up in hides or wear hides around you. Now, after European contact, cotton clothing became available, and this the Native Americans liked. So what was very common was to see these white trade shirts that were traded to the Native Americans. They weren't always necessarily white, but white was the cheapest thing because it didn't require a dye. So obviously the traders were trying to make as much profit, so they would trade the cheapest material. So white shirts were very often traded to the Native Americans. I've even heard of accounts of when Native Americans would sign a treaty with, say, the French or the English, they would be gifted packs of goods, and these white shirts were commonly gifted as kind of like a signing bonus for joining alliances with these British or French forces. So these white shirts became common. Would they be worn throughout a hunt or just around camp? Probably not. These white shirts were more of a dress up, maybe go off to see the fort, go to visit friends, go out to do some ceremonial purpose. But they would be wearing the white shirts kind of as a, I'm going to dress up to look good today type event. So the white shirts did become very common, and that's when the only time you really would see woodland Native Americans wearing shirts at all. Now another thing you see is belts. Belts would, prior to this, woven sashes would have been used as a belt if belts weren't used prior to European contact. But after European contact, it wasn't impossible to see a Native American wearing a white man's belt, and that would be with, you know, a buckle and leather. Now, they could get this through trade, or very commonly just taking them off the people they may have killed, because the 1700s saw many wars, American Revolution, French and Indian War, not to mention scuffles between natives and Europeans moving into the area. So it wouldn't be uncommon to see them just looting from dead, or looting from killed, or looting from captives taken. So, that was common. Bags were worn by woodland Native Americans, and this is something that didn't get replaced very quickly at all, their traditional bag wear. Now I'm wearing 2 bags today. The reason I would wear 2 bags instead of 1 is because 1 bag would be your possibles bag, and that would support all your needed materials for your weapon. As you saw me carry in a rifle, rifles were very commonly available to the natives. Actually, almost every woodland native had a rifle at this point. So like I said, this would hold all your abilities to fire your weapon. Now these were often decorated with, you know, traditional woodland Native American designs. This one has a turtle on it. Turtles were very important to all woodland most woodland Native American tribes. For many reasons, it was a very respected and revered animal, and a lot of reasons that would be is turtles play a central role in a lot of the creation stories for the woodland, creation of the earth for the woodland Native American tribes. This bag over here would be more your personal bag. This would hold whatever personal things you wanted. It is decorated with some little bit of beadwork. Also has a turtle embedded on there. And also, this is adorned with scalp locks, hair scalps on it, and these are dyed red. Red was a very common color for woodland Native American warriors to wear because red was often associated with war and often seen as a warrior's color. So, that's where the bags are coming. Now here you see something called, this would be your neck knife. It had a common trade knife in it, which would be metal at this point in time. So it was common for them to have a common trade knife, nothing special there. But what's really special and unique is the sleeve itself, the neck sleeve. Which was a common feature among woodland Native Americans to wear neck knives. And they would often put designs in them, and they would be designed with quills, porcupine quills, and this was called quill work. And these these porcupine quills would be cut and then dyed and then put on the knife sleeve. And these designs and colors would become eventually unique to one individual tribe. So what design and what quill work you were wearing on your neck knife sleeves eventually became like a name tag. And by wearing that, this showed I was Iroquois, this showed I was Wyandot, this showed I was Lenni Lenape. So that would be important. And also they would often be decorated with scalp watches. It was a very common practice to do in the woodland regions of America. Now, clubs were often carried by woodland Native Americans. Now the woodland Native Americans had their own designed club. It was unique to their region. It was a club that often it was made of wood, completely carved of wood, and would have a ball shape at the end. And this would be a club used in battle. Now, what was common was, especially among higher-ranking members of a tribe, to carve the club at the end of the ball, to carve the bald-headed end of the club. And this one here is carved with a warrior's head, once again painted up with that red war paint, because as I mentioned, red was a color of war, or a warrior's color. So these bald-headed war clubs were unique to the region of the woodland tribes, and you'd see almost every Native American warrior of the woodland region carrying one. And the reason these were commonly carried even after guns became available was these guns often had, one-shot reload. So you might have to run in to do a war club charge or finish off. It was common to get to hand-to-hand combat in this time period. Now, something else you'll see me wearing is, here I have a bracelet. Now, this bracelet is woven together with wampum beads. And wampum is a bead that is made from shells. Now, I plan to do another video here eventually, more in depth upon wampum and its meaning and the belt's meaning. But wampum was, in short, was a very hard to make, and it was a bead made of the wampum shell. So the traders saw that how much the natives valued these beads, and they learned that they can real quickly make glass ones and trade them to the natives. And after that happened, the woodland natives started wearing these glass wampum beads, as this one is here, and wearing them a lot. And this would become a common trade item and commonly worn in the 1700s. Now, something else that you see that was traded to the Native Americans of the woodland region. Native Americans, this kind of is universal with native indigenous peoples, but especially in the woodland regions, they love to bling. They like to dress up and look good and look important. So you'll see a lot of metal being worn by Native Americans and being traded to Native Americans. Common metals were copper, brass, silver. So you'll see, like I said, the brass and metal and copper metal wares was very common. Now you'll see on my neck here you have something that is brass and copper and metal. This one's copper. But this is called a gorget. Now gorgets were worn by British and French officers, kind of like a medal or a badge would be worn today, to show rank. Now woodland natives saw that the important men among the Europeans, among the whites, wore these, and the important men among the woodland Native American tribes saw this and thought to themselves, I'm an important man. I should have one of these too to show that I'm an important person. So they would often either, one, take these from the dead, but it was very rare for a officer, not very rare, but it was not too common for officers to be dying in battle and for it to be available for a woodland native to loot a dead officer and take one of these. So traders saw that the natives very valued these and wanted these, so they started making them out of metals like copper, because originally only silver and gold was used as metals with the officers. Now, something else you'll see me wearing is my glasses. Now, a lot of people are going to look at this and say, oh, Native Americans didn't wear glasses. For the most part, that's true, but there have been some accounts of woodland Native Americans actually wearing these glasses. Now, opinions vary on whether this was actually done for the woodland Native Americans' vision, or whether this was done because they just like to wear trinkets. But one benefit that is available if you wear glasses in this time period, as these are authentic to this time period, would be you could hold these up and make fires with the light. So that would be another reason maybe a woodland would want to wear them. Not a super common thing to see, but not completely out of place to see either. A couple other things you might see would be tattoos and face piercings. I don't have any, but they would sometimes be with brass or metal or trinkets, metal trinkets like I'd mentioned that they had received through trade. Or traditionally before that you might see feathers worn through the nose or something along those lines. And often these feathers would be woodpecker feathers, because a lot of woodland tribes really revered the woodpecker, because if you ever watch woodpeckers, they fly around and they'll fight, and they'll attack each other over territory, and so the woodland Native American warriors saw this and thought, well, we fight, we're warriors, and they copied nature as they do in a lot of areas, and they would try to wear the feathers to invoke the power or strength that the woodpecker may have. So that leads me to my next statement of where the feathers are being worn in my hair. Now, the woodland natives, as most natives do, wore feathers out of respect or revere for the bird that they may have come from, but they didn't wear the big feathered war bonnets or hats that you picture a chief wearing whenever you think of a stereotypical Native American chief. They didn't wear that. That was not something that was worn by the Native Americans of the woodland region. They would just wear either a couple feathers or maybe just a clump of feathers worn on the back base of their head. Now also you'll see here I have some brooch upon my head. They would be worn as a type of something worn by the warriors, and this was done, I've heard a couple theories on this. One theory is that this was also done to replicate the woodpeckers, because woodpeckers had those red crowns on their head, so woodland warriors would wear these to show their status as a warrior. But unregarded, they were worn by the warriors to show warrior status, and they were often red, because red would symbolize war or the warrior status. It was a color of war. So they were often red, sometimes other colors, but red was most common. Also why warriors would often paint their faces red, or paint part of their face or part of their body red, to show that they're, to invoke the power of war and the warrior status. So that's all I got for this video. If you found anything interesting in this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. I hope to plan to maybe do more videos in the future along these lines of this type of history, and hopefully to educate people not only on the indigenous and the native people, but other types of history of this time period. So thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.